Hello and welcome to my video about the Gay Museum in Berlin, or if you're going to say in German, it's Schwules Museum. Strangely, museum is the same word in English and in German. So I visited the Schwules Museum, or the Gay Museum, in August of 2023, and it was a great visit. I wanted to share with you some of the things that I found really interesting, and if you're thinking about going, hopefully you'll feel a little bit more informed after this video. So, why did I visit the Gay Museum? I suppose for me, I think it's important for us to understand our history, and especially being a member of the LGBT community, I really wanted to understand what gay history has been like within Germany, or Berlin more specifically, as it's a city that I've been to visit quite a few times now, as I have a friend who lives out there, so I usually go and see them every year. I'm quite surprised really that there isn't more LGBT museums. Generally, in the UK, I think we've had our first permanent one open in London, maybe 2022. And yeah, I think it's from discussing it with other people in the community, it leads me to the belief that if we don't document and put our history there for people to learn from, it's very easy for us to forget our history. And that was one of the statements that was made after the atrocities that happened as part of Nazi Germany and the death of so many Jews, is that we have to remember our history so we don't make the same mistakes again. And so museums have a really important role to play in remembering how we end up in certain situations. So in the UK, we had something called Section 28 that was introduced by Margaret Thatcher's government, and that made it illegal to promote homosexuality. So it makes sense that there isn't necessarily many museums about gay history or culture, because until maybe the 90s, it wasn't even possible for us to have them. And so then you think about the whole legacy and time that takes to set things up. So in Germany, there was something similar. It was called Paragraph 175. It had actually been in place since 1871. It made it a crime for males to have sexual relations. Now, there were amendments made to this in 1935 by the Nazis, and it was actually one of the most severe persecutions of homosexual men in history which occurred. And for those that don't know, that's a lot of what happened, where people who were gay men or gay women were arrested and sent off to prisoner camps, similarly to people who were Jewish at the time of the Nazi rule. There's a couple of great exhibitions that are at the museum. Love at First Fight is the main exhibition that was on when I went to visit, and an exhibition about the queer movement spurred on by the Stonewall riots in New York City. And it's really interesting, there's video there hearing from people who were actually involved in the first St. Christopher's Street Day, or it's called CSD now, which is a parade and protest that started in Berlin in 1979, and hearing how the people who set that up originally went round flyering around certain buildings asking people to get involved, and had a couple of hundred. It's amazing to see, having visited that parade last year in Berlin, there's now almost 1 million people that take part every year. And it is a parade, but it's also still a protest around LGBT rights. So I personally found that very interesting, having been to the parade and seen how large it is, and then hearing about how its humble beginnings off the back of what happened in New York. One of the other exhibitions that was on was called Gap, Having Time, Counting Time, and Filling Time. Now this one I actually struggled with quite a bit, and it's because this exhibition is about not being productive. It's about just sitting, relaxing, and being in the moment. And I really struggle with that. I want to take in information, I want to do things. So going into that exhibition space where it's very much about just relaxing, there was beds in there, there was something on the screen being projected, it was kind of calm and dark. I managed maybe about 5 minutes, but a lot of people were in there for a lot longer, and it's a very interesting kind of expression of what should be in a museum space and how you use it. So I quite liked that as well, even if I found it difficult. One of the other things that I found really interesting was they have a recording from somebody calling the trans helpline in from an early 1990s call, and it just blew my mind, because even though I grew up in the 90s as a young child, you don't really appreciate how, if I was only a decade older, how difficult it would have been. And so there was so little information available back then for people who were either LGBT, and these helplines really were very crucial. I think just listening in on that phone call, which is available, you actually pick up an old handset and put it to your ear, you really understand how difficult it was for people when there wasn't the internet, when there wasn't all this freely available information or social media. And the only place that they were able to kind of get help and support was by picking up the phone and speaking to someone at a helpline, and then they could direct them to other groups, and how that information was being communicated and shared with people, even in like pamphlets being sent out in the post. So yeah, it's just a real appreciation, I suppose, of what we have available today and how we're able to connect within the community today, because it has changed dramatically. I also really enjoyed the part of the exhibition which was talking about how a lot of membership groups were started up in Berlin for people who were LGBT, and they would start up originally by going away and doing maybe like a day away in the countryside for gay and lesbians, and then they kind of morphed into more established groups for specific purposes. And there's examples there of flyers, pamphlets, leaflets that they created, and events that they held. For me, it was super interesting to see how people had managed to connect in an age again where there wasn't social media, there wasn't the ability to just text somebody. Everything had to be based on, I'll meet you at this time, at this place, and people passing information across throughout the community, and then producing these pamphlets, these booklets that can then be photocopied and posted out to people. It was just amazing that this kind of collaboration was going on to help people feel connected and to have a sense of being part of a community. There was also a great exhibition of photographs from gay clubbing and also drag queens, which it was very interesting. The photographer had taken both the drag queen on stage in full drag and then at home or in the dressing room out of drag, and just the two comparative pictures, the way they're framed, are very evocative and quite emotional. So I would definitely recommend having a look at that as well. The museum also has a cafe, so you can have a drink or a beer, and there's a garden in the back as well, so you can sit out in the garden if it's sunny, which it usually is in Berlin. Sit out there, enjoy some of the nice flowers that have been planted. It just absorb everything you've taken in, really. There's also a gay bookshop there with some really interesting literature. Most of it was in German, but again, I've actually bought one of the books, I think, from an exhibition previously, because I really liked the representation in the art of LGBT people. So you don't need to be able to speak German to maybe understand some of the images in the book. Overall, I would highly recommend it. I think it's really important that we support these spaces which are there to document our history and give us a voice and give us an understanding of how we have struggled and had to fight for rights. And so I think it's just amazing that this museum has been open since around 1985 in some form. So it's got a real legacy, it's got a huge history there, and I would definitely recommend visiting if you're coming to Berlin. And I do hope that we see more LGBT museums opening up. I think there's maybe about 5 or 6 in Europe at the moment from when I did my research, and now we have one in London. That's great. But there's so many other stories that we need to be told for people in our community, and a permanent space where they can exist rather than just temporary exhibitions where they get put on, and if you're not there or you miss it, it's no longer there. So, and there's a much wider benefit of having these safe LGBT spaces. So I hope to see more of them. If you've been to visit yourself, let me know what you think, or if not, you're going to come, let me know in the comments below. And I hope you've liked this video. If you have, please click the subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one.